We're saying lucky draw.
Thank you.
Hey, did y'all get the...
This ranks in terms of crazy and party history. Is that Kim Williams?
Sorry.
It'll be like a minute tops. If I, yeah. Yeah, just send me
He's got a nice.
After complaining about it.
I call this meeting of the First District Republican Committee to order. Please rise to the invocation, the pledge, and the Republican Creed. Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, who has given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech you that we may always prove ourselves a mindful people of your favor and glad to do your will. Bless our land with honorable ministry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people, the multitude brought here out of many kindreds and tongues. Endow with your spirit of wisdom those whom in your name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to your law we may show forth your praise among the nations of the earth. Time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, do not let our trust in you fail. All of which we ask through our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
That was a prayer for the nation by Thomas Jefferson. He wrote and delivered that. I've asked Adela Bertoli to lead us in the pledge. The flags are to my right.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I've asked Al Ayler to read the Republican Creed.
We believe that the free enterprise system is the most productive supplier of human needs and economic justice, that all individuals are entitled to equal rights, justice, and opportunities, and should assume their responsibility as citizens in a free society, that physical responsibility and budgetary restraints must be exercised at all levels of government, that the federal government must preserve individual liberty by observing constitutional limitations, that peace is best preserved through a strong national defense, that faith in God, as recognized by our founding fathers, is essential to the moral fiber of the nation.
Thank you. Be seated. I'd like to ask Joel Carr to serve the proxy committee.
I have two proxies. Are there any others? Mr. Chairman, I have two proxies. One from Carol Dawson that appoints William J. Deutsch as her attorney in law, and one from Larry Kyle that appoints Steve Albertson, and they're in order.
Okay. We pass those up for Good, thank you. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a couple of remarks. First, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Members of the district, I know many of you have driven a little ways to get here. And it's a large district, and I know how challenging that could be. But I thank you for making time to attend this meeting. It's a very important one. And I want you to remember that, tonight's proceedings are not about the preference of one nomination method over another. It's not about our preference for one candidate over the other. As a district committee, this is about the rank and file voters who reside in our district. And as we debate and decide the issues this evening, we need to bear that in mind. The voters expect fair and transparent process that they can have faith in. So that's what I charge you with delivering to them tonight. So tonight's proceedings, because it's an appeal, it'll be a little bit more formal than our normal meeting at the restaurant, okay? So I ask you to bear with me as we run through some of the formalities that we'll have to undertake this evening. Just one reminder throughout the evening is that only members of the committee, and the representative from each side of this appeal will be able to speak. I would ask you to remind you to please address your questions or comments to the chair and not to each other. Okay? The first order of business tonight, and I'll pass these around. I wanted to pass these out just so you could begin to look at them while we run through the roll call. We'll be establishing rules for the appeal tonight and make sure we stay on track. So with that, Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Okay, I will only be calling names of the voters. Bob Watson, here. Good to you. Heather Steffel.
Present.
And Willie Deutsch, proxy.
Here by proxy, Carl Dawson.
Yep. Mark Daniel.
Here.
Russ Wright.
Here.
And Steve Albertson, proxy.
Here by proxy for Larry Cobb.
I'm sorry.
Here by proxy for Larry Cobb.
And Jennifer Weigel.
Here.
Republicans.
Here.
And Jeff Silly.
Present.
And Dave Rector.
Present.
And David Willis.
Present.
And Charlotte Horn. Not present. Pat Dunnington.
Here.
Okay. Dale Taylor.
Here.
Chris Henderson.
Here.
Bill Riley. King and Queen. Okay. Ron McElrath. King George. John Hubbard.
Here.
Mike Schollworth.
Here.
Fulton Wood.
Here.
Trudy Fagan.
Here.
Jerry Benson.
Here.
John Huber.
Here.
Bill Card.
Here.
Debbie Harper. Richmond. Okay. Scott Phelps.
Here.
Adela Bertolini.
Here.
And Alan Taylor.
Here.
Okay. '23, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. So the first order of business we'll take up is just establishing the rules for debate tonight. And I'll just walk you through each piece of this and then entertain any changes on these that you want to make, any, or anything. This is a starting point that I think is a good place to start. So basically what we'll be doing, you know, tonight is once we decide on the rules, we will have a discussion on whether or not to hear this appeal. If we decide to hear it, we will then move into the portion for the main appeal and debate. And then, depending on the outcome of the vote on the appeal, we will have a debate on the remedy. In other words, how to resolve the issue. So for the first part on the initial question of whether to appeal, I've suggested that we allow the appellant and a member of the opposing parties 3 minutes each. And then I
Mr.
propose.
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman?
I
Yes,
would
Jack.
like to also add RPB counsel to the representatives at the beginning since he is here. And I think we should have the opportunity to at least ask him a few questions.
Is Mr. Silly making a motion?
We'll get a motion on the rules as a whole. He's suggesting that in the first line, we include the RPB counsel in that, since he did make the drive. Then each speaker will be allowed 30 seconds to make statements for or against the motion. We'll limit the debate to that to 10 minutes, and then vote on it. And then for the main appeal, I'm suggesting 15 minutes for each side to make a presentation, followed by a 20-minute question period where you can just ask questions of each side, maybe clarify things that you're not sure of. And then we'll do that. You'll have 30 seconds per member to do that. The parties will have a minute to respond. When we move into the debate, I'm suggesting 20 minutes for the debate, and again, with each member having 30 seconds to make their point. And I'll point out that will not be transferred. Okay. And then if we do debate on the remedy, proposing that we use the rules that we're using for the main motion. I added a section in here about fact witnesses. I don't know if we'll have any, but if there are members that are here, someone here that is a private citizen, other than a committee member or a Virginia licensed attorney, if they are called in for something, they will be sworn before they provide any kind of testimony. There has been a tendency in the past for fact witnesses to be less than truthful, or at least we'll swear. And for what it's worth, I'm a notary, so I'll swear. And finally, at the bottom, I'm proposing that the chairman will decide to scope of the rules that are implied within the spirit of the rules. It gives me some latitude here, and I didn't want to cover every single possibility here. So I'm asking for some leeway if we get into a decision on letting somebody finish a sentence after a minute, or something like that. Okay. Other than Jeff suggested about the RPB council hearing from him, are there any other suggestions on that? Willie?
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. If there are other motions that may arise, what are the rules as far as time that would be used to handle this?
Well, we've got, the set debate periods, so if we're running, we can look at the debate time if we have to. But that would be very hard to do and very, sort of, it would be very arbitrary, so. Any other questions or suggestions on this? Is there a motion to accept the rules as presented?
Move the adoption of the rules as presented.
Second.
With the amendment?
With the amendment. With the amendment. Any other discussion?
Point of order.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify this
Point of
amendment.
order, Mr.
Oh, yes, Steve.
Has the gentleman from Caroline made a motion that has been seconded and voted on to amend the proposed rules.
No, I didn't take it as a
We're gonna
separate,
take it as a motion.
I didn't take it as a separate motion.
Because you presented rules as amended, they have not yet been
Oh.
amended.
Well, as add to.
They have not yet been added to.
Jeff, do you want to make a?
I'll make a motion that we have RP counsel as a representative for 3 minutes as the attorneys have been granted.
I'll
Or
second.
representatives have been granted.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? No other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Now we'll move to the main motion. That was yours, Willie, to adopt the rules as now amended formally. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you. The rules are adopted. Okay, at this time I will offer 3 minutes each, one from the appellate and one from the opposing party on whether or not to hear the appeal. Is there someone here representing the appellate?
I am.
Okay. And sir, if you could just introduce yourself.
My name is Jeffrey Adams. I represent Scott Wyatt in this matter, and I also represent the interests of the RPV members who attended the mass meetings and the delegates who were selected there.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
One moment. Just for the record, so people know, you are a licensed attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
May I either use the podium or sit, if the chair is providing permission? I think I'll stand, actually. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your attendance here tonight. I know this is an imposition on your busy schedules, and I will be brief. As I said, I represent Mr. Wyatt, and I am here first to explain to you why you should hear this appeal at this time. The key provision for determining whether this appeal is right, as we lawyers would say, is found in the party plan, and it's Article 10B3. And it says, each district committee, such as this one, shall decide all controversies and contests arising within its jurisdiction. It shall also hear and decide all timely appeals taken from units and legislative districts within the district. Persons deemed adversely affected by a decision of the district committee shall have the right to appeal to the state central. So there is a right to appeal from the LDC to this committee. Now, a key point that's been raised repeatedly is this question of a 30-day window. A 30-day window. Does that window have to close before you can hear the appeal? And the answer is no. The question is, has the appeal already, or has the contest already been addressed at the LDC level? The genius of the plan is it allows a legislative district committee or another official committee to reconsider its own decisions before a higher body touches on them. However, the time frame in the plan is not a minimum time frame, but a maximum. And it's important to keep in mind that the 97th Legislative District Committee has in fact already heard the contest and made a definitive ruling. It has done this in 2 regards, and we can see this from both Robert's Rules of Order as well as from the party plan itself. With regard to Roberts, a motion to postpone a matter to a time certain is out of order if that time certain is of such a time that to grant the motion to adjourn is in effect to deny the motion. And the proper response of a chairman when faced with such a motion is either to rule it out of order or to declare a motion to postpone indefinitely. And a motion to postpone indefinitely is a motion to kill the matter. And that is exactly what happened when the 97th LDC postponed this matter, supposedly, until June 5th. This matter relates to a canvass that is scheduled purportedly for June 1st. Mr. Wyatt and all of the delegates and all of the members of the RPV who participated in the mass meetings would be denied their remedy if, by using procedural legerdemain, the committee was able to push any consideration of the appeal past June 1st, which is exactly what they're attempting to do. So under Robert's Rules of Order, that motion is a motion to postpone indefinitely, i.e. a motion to kill. And so the appeal was killed at that level, and it is now right for you to consider. Also, under the party plan, there is a 14-day requirement. The 97th LDC is required to hear this in 14 days.
So again, gentlemen, you have 3 minutes. Anybody from the opposing party that would like to speak?
I guess that would be me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you announce just who you are for the benefit
I'm
of the second?
Mike Wyatt, and I represent the peace campaign. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a former district chairman and rather good at the book. First of all,
Excuse me, Mike.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just swear you just formally.
Okay, I'm good.
So, yeah. No
What
offense taken.
the mic says.
Just make sure. So, sir, do you swear that the facts and information you are about to give are true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Oh, we got it.
Okay, proceed, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable counsel points out that the appeal is right, but that is not so. A motion to postpone page 188 in Robert's Rules states that when you get to the point of postponement, when it comes back on the date, that it is debatable, and it is also to be voted on again. The decision also that it is right and that it goes past the June 1st canvass is also incorrect, as the actual process for the RPV is stated in the party plan. You cannot hear this appeal until a decision has been rendered. No decision was made from the 97th committee. Ergo, there was no appeal made based on a decision, nor has that appeal been signed by 25 new members to come to this body. That is part of the appeals process in black and white. And to forget it throws all the rules out. On the matter of June 5th and June 1st, the true decision of this process will be decided on June 26, 2019 by the State Board of Elections. That will give time for all appeals to take place through the party process as by the party plan. So I ask you to consider the real facts of the matter, and that is that this appeal is not right. It is not to be heard tonight, as if no decision was made from the 97th. It was between Roberts and the rules. It was good, the motion was strong, and it is valid. To hear it here is invalid and has no effect. Thank you.
Do I have 10 minutes on the clock?
Mr. Chairman, may I have one thing, please? Back up 1 second. Stop 10 seconds.
Fine.
Also, may I add that Chairman Daniels in the meeting made a motion for a substitute motion to pass it by indefinitely, which failed, never got a second. And then the motion passed with 76% of the vote to be heard on June 5th, and I think that's consequential to your thought process. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, do you dare speak for 3 minutes?
It certainly won't take 3 minutes.
People drove a long way to hear you. You have the floor.
So I think the representatives of the two sides have correctly stated the decision criteria, which is, as they mentioned, Article 10, Section B, 4 and 5, which relate to the timing of appeals and appeals of appeals. So the question before you is really, I think, a factual one as to what the legislative district committee did. If their actions constituted rendering a decision, then the matter would be appealable. If their actions did not constitute rendering a decision, then they would not be appealable. That's all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Now we have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
will we have an opportunity to ask legal counsel questions as well? It's not in the rules.
No, we would have to amend the rules to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna be here all night.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're gonna proceed. I've got 10 minutes on the clock. So members will have 30 seconds to make a statement for or against the motion, to hear this appeal. Is there someone who would like to speak for the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we hear the appeal of Scott Wyatt, the appellate, the petitioner, and that the basis of that is that there was a call issued, never rescinded. There were 3 mass meetings held that duly constituted a convention. They sent delegates to that convention, and at that point, the fate of the nomination lied directly in the hands of that convention. We need to respect the activity that at this point cannot be undone. And for that reason, I move that we hear the appeal
been moved to hear and it's been seconded. And Bill, you've already spoken. Who would like to speak against the motion?
I'd like to
Speak against the motion to hear?
I will do that.
30 seconds.
The Legislative District Committee has a set of rules that they need to follow. Us meeting today circumvents any legislative district that's been seated. Just because the legislative district was, when the chairman of the legislative district was changed, which is perfectly legal according to the party plan, I think that that new committee that didn't have any withstanding person wanting to run for that office had more standing than the committee previously, and I think it should be operated on that's the standing committee for the legislative district.
Okay. Thank you. Who would like to speak for the motion to hear?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Daniel?
there are multiple motions made for the appeal to be heard. We went by a process that we were given, was the true and way to go, and after we made our motion to reconsider, we found out after that there had been mistakes made and we had to yet convene another meeting. There's been multiple meetings convened, and for the if you think about the appeal, it was denied because they, in essence, would take longer to hear than the contest that is in question. So I speak. Thank you.
Who would like to speak against?
Mr. Chairman, I would.
Yeah.
The 97th Legislative District has not put this appeal aside, nor voted up or down on it. What we have asked is time to get evidence to either support this appeal or to contest it. There are things in this appeal that other people disagree with, and it needs to be, I think, left in the 97th for the time being. And there's nothing that's going to be done that can't be undone at the 5th of June.
Okay. Thank you. Who would like to speak for?
Mr. Chairman,
Steve?
page 184 Robert's Rules, neither the motion to postpone to a certain time nor any amendment to it is in order if the effect would be the same as that of the motion to postpone indefinitely. That is, it would kill the measure. For example, a motion to postpone until tomorrow with any question of accepting an invitation to a banquet tonight cannot be recognized as a motion to postpone to a certain time. It is in fact disposing of the motion. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. With respect to the previous speaker, this action is designed to kill the appeal. It is in having taken that action, it is firmly within our purview to review tonight.
Who would like to speak against? Anybody else? Are we ready for the question? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of hearing the appeal tonight, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The appeal will be heard.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to find that the motion at the 97th Legislative District Committee to change the method of nomination after all of the delegates have been elected, after all the mass meetings have been held, and 3 days prior to the convention was out of order, and thus that we should vote to sustain the appeal.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made to sustain the appeal, and it's been seconded. At this time, the appellant and the opposition parties will have 15 minutes each to make their presentation, so I invite the appellant to come forward. And sorry, I just offer that we do have a very, very diligent timekeeper. You may want to be where you can see his assignments. Okay,
Let's go over here,
So,
that's all right. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time and your attention. I am here on behalf of Mr. Wyatt, as well as all of the participants at the mass meetings, as well as the 1,665 delegates and alternates that were chosen at those mass meetings. There was reference made already to the facts of this case, but we all know that the facts are matters of public record. There is no question about what the facts are. The 97th Legislative District Committee freely, as its right under the Constitution of the United States, chose a convention as the method of nomination. They had the right to choose any other method, and they chose a convention. And really, this is not about, and sometimes our debates within the party sometimes get wound around the axle of methods of nomination. It's not about any particular method. It's about the right of the the LDC to choose the method, but also the right of the members of the party and the candidates to rely on that choice after a particular moment. So the method is chosen freely, pursuant to the constitutional rights of that committee. That committee issued a call, which I will note has never been rescinded. There was never a vote to rescind that call, and that call remains a good call. Based on that call, 3 unit committees, Hanover, King William, and New Kent, issued their own calls for mass meetings. And in reliance on those cascading calls, the Republicans of those counties came together, they voted, and they chose their delegates. And it's interesting because, as I'm sure many of you know, each of those delegations was fully subscribed. I'm from the Stanton Committee. We're a small committee in a crazy town. I love Stanton, but it is. And we have a hard time sometimes getting enough Republicans to subscribe to things. We're in the wilderness, unlike many of you. We're fighting the good fight against the prevailing winds. But here, you had every delegate slot filled. You had massive participation. And then after all of that, you have a legislative district committee that decides it wants to change the method of nomination. I'll leave it to your imagination why that would be. But in effect, what that amounts to is changing the rules of the game in the middle of that game. It amounts to changing the election process after votes have been cast and counted. It is nothing less than that. And it's important to keep that in mind. In the whole debate about this within the state, it has been very frustrating because we've been talking about the finer points of Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure, and we have been ignoring, if you'll excuse the terrible pun, the elephant in the room, which is disenfranchising all of those participants in those processes. Those people have never been heard, and this is their chance to be heard. Now, let's talk about the technicalities, because moral indignation is not enough in this context. Why was what the committee ultimately did wrong? And I'm not going to belabor the point as to why it was procedurally wrong, although it was, and that is in the written submission that the Wyatt campaign has made in this process. I'm going to talk about the heart of the matter. I'm going to circle around it and get closer and closer and closer. First, it's wrong under Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's rules are very clear that a motion to rescind, and again, the key act, one of the key acts in this process was the motion to rescind supposedly the convention and to a motion and to cancel the convention. A motion to rescind is out of order to the extent it seeks to rescind something or undo something that cannot be undone. And chapter and verse is provided in our materials under Robert's Rules of Order. For those of you who don't have that, it's section 35 on page 308 of the most recent version. Again, section 35, page 308. It says, the motions to rescind and to amend something previously adopted are not in order under the following circumstances. And B is when something has been done as a result of the vote on the main motion that is impossible to undo. The unexecuted part of the order, however, can be rescinded or amended, which is interesting. They wanted to perhaps delay the convention. That may have been in order. People could have debated that point. If they were serious about improving the convention, they could have tried that. They didn't. They wanted a new process. Again, I'll leave it to your imagination why they wanted a new process after the votes were counted. And they were trying to undo the mass meetings and the selection of the delegates. And those are things which we will discuss which had been removed from the power of the LDC. An LDC calls a convention. An LDC plans a convention, but an LDC doesn't run a convention, and an LDC isn't a convention. Under both Robert's Rules of Order and the party plan, the delegates are the convention. The delegates constitute the convention. And once the delegates are selected and certified, the final power over that convention has passed from the LDC to those delegates. Under Roberts, the appropriate site, if you're interested in these sorts of things, it's section 58 on page 600 and following. Section 58, pages 600 and following, talks about the fact that a convention is a convention of delegates. It's not a convention of committee members. It's not a convention of the RPV. It's not a convention of the first district. It's a convention of the delegates who are properly selected and certified. And only they have final authority over what happens at that convention once they are certified. We all know this if you've been involved in a convention. I was on a provisional rules committee and then a final rules committee for the 6th District Convention. Well, as a provisional rules committee, we could propose things, but we ultimately couldn't dispose. It was the convention's decision what those rules would be. The provisional credentials committee can create a role and can advise and can organize, but they cannot finally determine, because at that point, the power has moved to the delegates, and only the delegates acting in the convention can make those decisions. And that is entirely consistent with the party plan. If you look at Article 8 of the party plan, the coherence of all of this really starts to fall into place. If you look at Article 8H, and this relates to delegates to a convention, and I think this is really brilliant language. It's easy sometimes to critique other people's work and to look for things that you might improve in a document, but this is an example of a document getting it exactly right, even though it's a little wordy by necessity. If you look at Section H, and it's 1A, related to the certification of delegates. It says, delegates and alternates to a convention shall be certified to that convention by the permanent chairman and secretary of the mass meeting or convention which selected them, or by the chairman of the official committee who conducted such meeting or convention. The certifications shall be delivered to the chairman of the official committee which called the convention prior to the convening of the convention. There's a lot of words there. What is essential? The certification, interestingly, does not go to the chairman of the LDC in this case. The certification of the delegates are certified to the convention. Look at the language. The convention is already constituted once the delegates are selected and certified. Now, yes, the paper is delivered to that chairman, but that chairman is acting in his provisional and organizational role, supporting the convention. But that chairman no longer has authority, and that committee has no longer complete authority, really any authority over the convention itself. Their responsibility, now that we've gotten to the certification of delegates, is one of organizing and preparing for the convention of someone else. And that someone else is the delegates. And that's exactly the problem with what was done with this rescission motion. If it happened before mass meetings, if it happened before certification of delegates, that would be a very different question. But that is not the question you're faced with. You're faced with, do we unseat delegates who have already been selected and certified? And I submit to you that under Roberts and under the plan, that is impossible. That cannot be done. It is ultra-virus. Pick a word, it can't be done. And to attempt to do it is, frankly, an outrageous overstepping of the LDC's authority. And then the last point, which I'll be brief on, and this does go to really the fundamental question of fairness within the party. One of the things I like to say is we are a large party. We are a diverse party. We disagree on a lot of things. I think we disagree on more than the Democrats do. You can still exist in this party as a pro-choice Republican. Maybe uncomfortable at times, but there's enough space. You can exist in a variety of ways, and we have a broad party. What holds us together? Well, first of all, shared principles. One of those principles is constitutionalism, a fair process yielding a legitimate outcome. And if we get in the habit of breaking our nomination processes, of changing them in the middle, of canceling votes, of unseating delegates, of Katie bar the door, if I'm losing, all bets are off, we're going to do whatever the hell it takes to win, we cannot hold together as a party. We need to be able to come together and say, there was a legitimate process, and win or lose, I was heard. And because of that, whoever the nominee is, I can support them in good conscience. If we engage in this kind of nonsense, that unity is impossible. This is the Hunger Games, for those of you with children who are in your 20s and This is a war of all against all. This is no tool gets left on the ground. No technique is left at the door. And I don't think that's how we want to deal with each other. I don't even want to deal with the Democrats that way. Let them play that game. But I certainly don't want to deal that way with fellow Republicans. And the party plan identifies this. It has provisions related to endorsement and support of candidates by official committees, and that's in Article 7, Section I. And it has provisions on ethical conduct, that's Section J1. An official committee cannot endorse or give any financial support under the plan to any candidate in a contested nomination. The point being that the official committee is making the rules and is administering the process. And for that process to be viewed as legitimate, it needs to be above reproach. It can't be seen to be favoring one nominee or the other. Well, I submit to you that a modest financial contribution or an endorsement is worth nothing compared to being able to choose the method of nomination after votes have been chosen and people can assess what the outcome is likely to be. After those decisions have already been made, there is no way you can maintain any plausible neutrality, and clearly you have a thumb on the scale for one candidate if you do that. And again, with regard to the ethical conduct, all party members in the fulfillment of their official duties are required to act in good faith. In good faith. Again, sometimes the only way to act in good faith is to have a blindfold on. Lady Justice is portrayed as wearing a blindfold. And what the 97th LDC is trying to do is say, we want to rip the blindfold off. We want to give another bite at the apple to one candidate who believes he did poorly in these mass meetings. I would submit to you that that kind of procedural nonsense should not be countenanced within this party or by this committee. The last thing I'll say, just to counteract some arguments you make here as well, there was a lot of talk about the deficiencies of this convention. I have a couple of things to say about that. First of all, the convention ran well, for those of you who were there. Second of all, if the concern were deficiencies of the convention, the members of the LDC could have done any number of things to try to fix those deficiencies, including advance a motion to delay the convention, which again would be a very different analysis than we're bringing to bear here. We can debate whether that would be permissible and when, but it's certainly different than saying we're going to change the method of nomination, we're going to unseat the delegates, we're going to void the mass meetings. All things that an LDC cannot do clearly without any question. The other point is, if there were concerns about the mass meetings, where are those appeals? There is a process that we have in the party. That is why you are here. We are trying to advance a process to allow the legitimate organs within the party to decide these tough questions. And I understand how it is. You're in the throes of a competitive political race, and your blood is up, and it's easy to sometimes get run away with the passion of the moment. That's why we have processes like this. That's why we have appeals. That's why we have rules. If anyone wants to say that there's some problem with one of those mass meetings, they had every opportunity to say it, and they did not. They had every opportunity to avail themselves of a legitimate process to raise those questions. They did not. And to say we're going to just change the process and unseat the delegates, I'm sorry, that fails what we call the straight-face test, the most important legal test that we learn in law school. If you can't say it in front of a judge with a straight face, then you shouldn't, or if you can't say it and keep a straight face, then you shouldn't say it at all. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with arguments that fail the straight face test. We're dealing with a situation where, in the midst of a competitive nomination, there was a desire for an unfair advantage. And it's up to you to say no. And not just for Mr. Wyatt, although for him, but primarily for those participants at the mass meetings, for the delegates, and for the future of the party. And its critical ability to come together based on a legitimate process, produce a legitimate nominee, and then move forward to the election of Republican officers. Thank you for your time. I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. So we'll give 15 minutes to the other party. I wanted to add, I know the chairman of the 97th is here. Are you speaking for the opposition, or is someone else?
I can speak on behalf of the chair. Basically,
Mr. Wade wanted to.
Chronology of what took place date-wise and things.
And you also, well, I think it's important that the committee hear from both parties. I mean, you're chairman of state.
I won't take 15 minutes, so.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, it may be more appropriate to since we have a set of rules here passed, to treat the chairman as a fact witness?
Yes, I
And
will.
can allow someone who,
Yes,
actually on the other side?
Yes, yes, no, I absolutely. We want to do that, so, you're speaking from the,
Yes, sir.
okay. Is there anybody else from the 97? Or from the, the opposing party that will be speaking, or is it just mine? If not, we'll just give you the full 15 minutes then.
Is that what they have?
Yeah.
This may not be it.
Well, man, I asked you. I'm gonna try your mind, you know. Zero, so if you're ready, I'm looking at
Mr. Chairman and members, you're getting a pretty one-sided view of the situation. Let me take one moment of personal privilege. In 2006, under a situation where delegates weren't seated in the convention, I won the first appeal of the convention, 83-1 in state senate. So I know all about this process. And I have guided this. And while I've watched people try to impugn people, spread rumors and other things, I'm going to stick to some basic facts. On the day that the convention was canceled, we did not have an arrangement with Hanover Schools. We did not. Our insurance policy, granted by the first district, was in risk management of Hanover government. The chairman vacated the table under, we don't even know why, and walked out while members were trying to question him on key issues about what was going to take place, where were we going to meet. We had just been to Atlee School where the bleachers didn't work. We still didn't have a room. You ever had a wedding that you didn't know where the wedding was going to be 3 days before the wedding? And the chairman vacated his duties. And they elected a temporary chairman and could see on business. This happened the Saturday before on the 27th. And we talked about the integrity of membership and blinders and all this. Mr. Wyatt was a member of the committee. And somehow, on the first meeting to vote for a convention, he got stuck on 95, yet Mr. Cornelius was present with a proxy. Kind of confusing to me. So we're going to get that integrity question, which is wiped across the board. And to impugn anybody's integrity that I know that has dealt with this on the 97 District Committee and tried to make it right, or to impugn Mrs. Taylor for making a decision to remove someone that was already under conflict under Article J of ethics cause, who never wrote a letter, and as a man should have resigned. And I'm putting the question to you, why are we even here other than we are playing blinders off? It's very firm to me to see what's taking place. The facts that have been put into this appeal have been contradicted in the press. We are having a court reporter take all the audio and video and transcribe it, and it will be bulletproof legal to use. We plan on giving a rebuttal to this, but this has been forced here so that we can move it and make somebody else's world better. The same thing counsel says we shouldn't be doing. The gentleman, I don't understand your logic. You make one case for yourself, but it doesn't work when it's in my shoes. It has to work both ways by what you say. That fails. What I do know was we did not have a place to go. And let me go to the real heart of the matter. The 97th District
Point of
Committee.
order, Mr. Chairman. Can comments be directed to the chair?
Pardon me?
Can the speaker's comments be directed to the chair, as originally stated in the rules?
Yeah, I'll just remind the speaker, you may address the members of the committee or the chair, but not the third parties.
I'm sorry about that. I forgot you.
Proceed.
The 97th District call. As chairman of the 97th Legislative District Committee, LDC of the Republican Party of Virginia, pursuant to the plan of organization of the Republican Party of Virginia, RPV, is recommended and directed by the committee, I, Thomas Miller, do hereby issue a call for a legislative district convention to be held at Hanover High School at the address of Hanover High School on May 4th, 2019, to elect a nominee for the Tuesday, November 5th, 2019 election. Republican nominee. That's what we were doing. Done a lot of time. Okay? is that they left out of this appeal, totally in your mind, is that on Saturday, the 27th, 76% of the members, after Mr. Miller vacated the chair in Kemper, voted to take his authority away. The authority rested with Mr. Daniels, Mr. Hubbard, and Mr. Reynolds. They had the authority to transact business. That motion passed. It was even carried up in the next meeting on Monday. It was noted that it was. So my question is, when did we vote to move it? We never did. Better watch your stuff. Nobody voted to have the convention at Atlee High School. And more than once on video, Mr. Miller's made it clear, Mr. Daniels made it clear, we don't have the authority. We were at a meeting Friday night to draw lots. And something was presented. We have to vote on that because that's what the authority says. That's what the motion said previously. Never was there a vote to move it to Atlee High School. It didn't take place. And is there any dispute of that? There's a video on YouTube you can look at. It never took place. They called a convention. A convention did not open. That meeting canceled the convention before May 4th. He's correct. Robert says you can't undo what's done. But those mass meetings could have been canvases. They could have been conventions. And there was no way the 97th could tell those units what to do. They're separate. They're separate by our party plan. And to make conjecture that somehow this is all doesn't matter anymore, it does. It's the rule of law. And you especially don't leave your duties. You prosecute them. You have an oath. You're an emissary of this party. And what I'm seeing today makes me wonder. Well, I'm even here today because we shouldn't be. That convention was canceled before it ever was gathered. It never took place. That's what the call said to do. It even said, Mr. Counsel, that those certifications were to be sent to Mr. Miller from Hanover, from King William, and from New Kent. That's what the call says. You can cherry pick it all you want. But this is not what it is. They were sent, the certifications were sent to Mr. Miller, a member of the 97th District Committee. And several times in instances, members of the campaign staff, Wyatt, took place in the actual proceedings. Parliamentarian, at a meeting just recently, on the stage of the Hanover mass meeting, Middle Resolution Group, their program, 9 people on the floor in the 55th District. How did you get through registration? That was run solely by the Wyatt team. I could go on and on and on, but my point is simple. The convention could be canceled because it had not occurred, it had not gathered. I will agree with everyone in this room that thinks it should be the way they want it, and if it had gathered, we couldn't have done what we did. But it was not gathered, nor was it voted to move. Think about it. Does anybody else here going to argue that they didn't have the authority to vote to where it had to be? That they had to take that vote. They couldn't spend money. Mr. Daniels went with Mr. Hubbard to deposit checks, not Mr. Miller. There's a lot of things. The whirlwind of this is terrible. I'm not saying it isn't for our party to have to go through this. Pretty much it diminishes our view. But the facts remain that this convention could be canceled because it was not gathered. It was not done. And what those units did, these people had no right to tell them which choice they made to nominate their delegates. None. They're separate. They're separate by plan, they're separate by Roberts, they're separate by hierarchy. How much time do I have left?
6.5.
6.5. Man, I'm getting tired.
You don't have to use it.
Well, I'm just going to close with this. I mean, it's clear. The LDC had the power to make arrangements and contractual agreements. That's clear. They never voted to move the convention from Hanover High School to Atlee. That is clear. Unrefutable. convention can be canceled because Robert says what is done cannot be undone. What is not done can be undone. The convention was never gathered. There's no voter suppression because more people will be able to get the vote in this. People that are handicapped, people that couldn't make it out that day, and it's just wrong. As far as I'm concerned, party canvas is the only thing we should ever have for these type of nominations.
That's your opinion.
I have a right to speak.
The room will come to order.
As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to make my case. But I'm just saying, you can look at it all you want. But when the chairman left the table that day, for the second time, these folks had no place to have a convention, had no knowledge of what the insurance was. The school they were looking at had broken bleachers, and we had no authority from the city to even be in Atlee High School. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can stay up here if you'd like, Mike. I'd like to invite Mr. Adams to return to the front for the question period. At this time, we will move straight into questions. We've allotted 20 minutes for that. Each district committee member will have 30 seconds to ask a question of either party, and I just remind members it must be succinct and it must be a question. There will be no reciting facts or making arguments at this particular moment, but you may ask questions of either party to help you understand the facts. Adela.
So my question, actually, I would like to hear from both of you, and I would like an actual citation from either Robert's Rules or the party plan as the answer. Is there a process that allows for a contingency location for a convention if the location, for whatever reason, doesn't come to fruition?
Actually, the call itself was read incompletely, and the call, I'm not sure if Tom has a copy or Mark has a call.
Mr. Davis.
So what the call said was that I, Thomas A. Miller, do hereby issue this call for a legislative district convention to be held at Hanover High School, 10307 Chamberlain Road, Mechanicville, Virginia 23116, or its alternate site. And so the possibility, the practical need for having to move to another site was contemplated in the call itself. I don't believe there's a specific provision in the plan, but Roberts, I believe, does have provisions for that.
Okay, and just as a follow-up though, that answers my question for either one. My follow-up question is.
No, it's out where you've completed 60 seconds.
Okay.
And Mr. Wade, do you want to address?
I think she was trying to ask,
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a follow-up if you don't mind, because it's basically related. Is there, like if it's an alternate location, is the Robert's Rules or party plan signify that there has to be enough notice? Is there a notice requirement for an alternate location?
Yes, but that notice only has to be given on the building itself, and it should be changed at the RPB website. That's not the part that we're looking at here. The part is they have no authority to make a contract, and not only had they not made a contract with Hanover School and told the school system we would only have 600 delegates, and when the administration figured out that we were going to have 1,200 to 1,700 delegates, they pulled the plug because they had SATs that day. So yes, you can have an alternate site, but the problem is we went to the alternate site on Wednesday when questions were being asked to the chairman. He walked off and we weren't able to ask questions, and we weren't going to get put all in the bag with something that was totally incomplete at the time of that vote. Not subsequently and all the facts fall off, or that we have, my wife's a producer. She can come set up a convention like that for us, run real smooth, and the actors can show up.
Mr. Chairman, through question, can I quickly answer the follow-up as well?
No, we've answered those. Who else has a question?
You stated, Mr. Wade, in your remarks that when the chairman left the meeting, they then elected a temporary chairman.
Mr. Hubbard.
Okay, do you have a copy of those minutes so we can see that?
We don't have a copy of the minutes because the minutes were not taken by the secretary. Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel's secretary. I don't do minutes. I'm having the tapes transcribed. The peace campaign is having a court reporter transcribe those videos, and they will be certified as legal. Okay. So we did not, we have, matter of fact, I don't know of ones, we gotta realize that March 19th was the last time Mr. Miller called a meeting. It wasn't until Mr. Hubbard and Mr. Reynolds got together in April that we get a meeting. April 27th, a whole month transpired where nobody knew what was going on.
Okay.
Other questions? Fact questions? Willie?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. There's been a lot of talk about provisions and calls.
Willie, could you please distinguish who you're asking?
Honestly, I'll take
It's gotta be one or the other.
I'll take an answer from either party.
You can do both, but you just gotta be.
Both, if either one wants to answer. There's been a lot of discussion about clauses in conventions. There's traditionally clauses in terms of moving locations, possibly even moving dates. We often have automatic cancellation clauses, say only one candidate files. Was there any clause in this convention call for it to be canceled, repealed, et cetera, under a manner similar to what the LEC chose?
I have read the call, and there is no provision for cancellation within the call, nor is there a provision for cancellation within the party plan, which is why there's a certain uncertainty as far as the absolute parameters of this. But again, we stand on our position that once votes are taken.
And does the other party argue?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Does Mr. Wade show the same position, or do you have an interpretation, or do you have a clause?
I mean, you've asked the question, right? Mr. Adams, you finish?
I was just going to say that I'm unaware of no specific provision in the call or the plan that relates to cancellation, but we're standing on both Roberts and the plan with regard to both being unable to undo things that are done, but most fundamentally.
1 minute, you have 1 minute. Mr. Wade, did you want to
Yeah, I
answer
would.
his question?
All right. Cancellation, if you delve into it as it was researched, would require another call. It would require other calls from all the other units to get it as well. The delegates that were elected would be deemed elected, and others would be allowed to file. That's the research that we found parliamentary procedure on. So that's my only thing. There is no cancellation that you, or postponement of a convention if it hasn't started. I mean, I don't know how you could put it into recess, but I don't know. I'm not good to answer that question, Willie. I don't think that, I don't see it. I've looked extensively. What you do see is that if you cancel, you have canceled the meeting. You know, that's what you're doing. I mean, we get into the question of postponement, well, we're getting into the question of postponement like we are here. And that kind of makes me wonder where we're going with that. Sorry, I don't know. I've answered more than that.
I'll also remind the committee that the 97th chairman, is here. If you have questions for him as well, he would be a fact witness. I just want to remind the members of that. Who else has a question?
Yes,
Steve?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Adams. Like Mike, I've been around this process a lot of times, and I've seen lots of threats about lawsuits being generated by party actions. And this is no different. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But given your extensive experience in this area of law, how do you think a court challenge would unfold?
Sure. Two big poles here. We went through this a lot in the income protection lawsuit. On the one hand, the party has great latitude to determine its internal rules. And we have a First Amendment right under the Freedom of Association to have internal rulemaking processes. So to a large degree, the courts will respect that for the decisions that are made. The one glaring exception in Virginia law is a case called Chichester, which is a case in which, on very similar facts, a Democratic committee at the 11th hour changed a method of nomination after there had been reliance on that method by candidates and by voters. And the court issued a writ of mandamus, a writ demanding that that process be used, and overruled the decision of the party in that context. And so that is one of the few exceptions where you see Virginia courts intervening in a situation where at the 11th hour, the nomination process is canceled and changed. Pardon me? It was from Stafford. That's true. That's
Other questions?
I have a question.
Jeff?
In one of the presentations, it said that new signatures would be required for an appeal. Have any signatures been gathered for an appeal?
Yes, they have, I believe they've been submitted to the legislature.
Are you, yeah, who are you?
Both, I think they both deserve equal time to answer.
Yes, Michael, go first. Yeah.
No. They haven't. You had to have a decision in the 97 to get here. There was no decision. It was met on June 5th. That, if a motion to pass by indefinitely that Mr. Daniels had made had passed, well, I wouldn't have a whole lot to say here. But it failed. And that committee has a right to take its votes just as you do here. And further, that you have a time frame that goes to June 26th, so all this stuff about fruit and it's over and all that is just not true. And what the party plan says is you are to bring 25 new signatures based upon a rebuttal or what you're saying that the decision adversely affects you. None of that is present in this room today. None of it. There's not one thing the party plan says not right.
The signatures have been submitted to the chairman by the Wyatt campaign.
We all got copies of it.
Yeah.
What day?
There were two sets of signatures. There was one set submitted with the original appeal, and there was a second set that was given to the first district, I believe, today. So there were separate signatures for both, although my position would be that separate signatures are not required for what is, in a sense, the same appeals process.
Other questions? Other questions? Yes, Pat?
You made a comment that the convention wasn't a convention, but it was gathering, and that the units were free to use whatever method they chose. But is that inconsistent when the call was for a convention? So the only thing the units would be doing is electing delegates, not having a party canvas to elect a candidate.
The beauty of Roberts is theory. Theory, no one could have signed up to be a delegate. Theory. Nobody could have signed up to be a delegate.
No, they were elected.
Be elected, but nobody has to pre-file, right? Say nobody wanted to pre-file. Theory. Roberts is theory. We have a lot to, and the gentleman to my right, kind of made it clear that, the folks that became delegates didn't have a voice until they got to the convention. There was no voice of those delegates until that convention got. They didn't have any voice. They could die in between. Some people weren't going. I know one person that had a funeral for his brother. So that doesn't support the way the convention opens. It's a convention, and those delegates have a voice, but they have no voice up to the time of that convention gathering and voting for a temporary chairman. And that did not occur.
Okay.
I'm digging that timer.
Other questions? Russ?
This is Mr. Wade, I think it's a quick one. Could you just describe to us your full relationship with the peace campaign?
Sure, I consult them on the parliamentary procedure process, and that's pretty much what I've done the whole way through it, guiding them through it. I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty good at it too. So I get, it's a free country and I have a constitutional right to work for them. And as I said, there were plenty of people that were involved in the stage of your mass meeting, that were Wyatt,
It's out of order. Chris?
Chair, could we hear from the legislative district committee chair?
If you have a question for him, you may
Yeah,
direct
just
it to
a
him.
recitation of the facts of the dates and
Well,
times.
he's got, per our rules, he would have only 30 seconds to respond. He can, if he has anything that he wants to pass out or comment on or anything,
Well, a
you're free to
specific
address
question
it.
with regard to that individual, regarding, the fact of his stepping away from the chair, or resigning the chair, leaving the meeting. I'm trying to understand what the genesis of that event was, and why he took that step.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman of 97, if you'd like to come up and address that, you may. I'll swear you, and then you're gonna have to talk fast. You'll have 30 seconds.
The first meeting,
I'll just swear you first as a fact witness. So you swear that you, where's your? So, you swear that the facts and information you're about to give are the truth to the best of your ability? Good, thank you. You have 30 seconds, sir.
the meeting that was held at the Atlee Library that was adjourned was in a room that the fire marshal said we could have 49 people. There were over 70 people in the room, most of them were Wyatt supporters. We got to a point on the agenda where we were dealing with the rules. Mr. Hubbard made a motion to table the rules. I ruled that out of order, so we need to talk about the rules. They tried to overrule me. I ruled that out of order. Now people are shouting. People are extremely agitated. The next thing on the agenda was to rescind or amend the motion to have a convention.
Your time is up.
I adjourned it at that point.
Other questions?
Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller?
I'll get another 30 seconds.
I'd like to know what happened next.
I was halfway home. My kids had called my wife and said, "My God, what has Dad got himself into?" But if you watch the video, there were extremely strong words exchanged between Mr. Daniels and Mr. Marcus and I believe somebody else. They weren't nice. I will not repeat them here. So if we got to that motion, I didn't want to be responsible for the safety of that room.
Other questions? Any other questions? Okay, at this moment, we will move to the debate period. There is a motion on the floor that Steve made earlier. And again, this debate period will be 20 minutes. Each committee member will be allotted 30 seconds to speak to the main motion. Remember that the right to speak is not transferable. Okay? We have 20 seconds. 30 seconds. Okay. Steve,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
May I speak
yeah, you made the motion. I was going to give you 30 seconds to speak to it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, if this was about a flaw in the convention, if they're serious about this, they would have delayed the convention to fix the problems. The fact of the matter is, voted and counted on the delegates were known to the campaigns knew who was likely to win, and the loser changed the rules of the game at the last second. This would be a terrible precedent to set. Every one of our nomination methods would be fought out like this, like Mr. Adams said, the Hunger Games. Or the Godfather.
Who would like to speak against the motion? Who would like to speak against the
Mr.
motion?
Chair, I would like to say this.
John.
In the 97th, we did consider postponing the convention. However, it was determined with the time that we had left, it's not just a simple matter of changing the date. Our counsel was that this would be, in essence, a do-over. We would have to allow people to pre-file again. It would have pushed us way past any date for certifying a nominee. So the choice became between having a convention that we had far too many questions over, or having a canvass where all the citizens in the 97th in the Republican Party would be allowed to vote.
Your time. Who would like to speak for the motion? Willie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, we're dealing with a capricious and arbitrary action by a committee that was trying to change the rules after voting had started and it happened. Imagine if we had a general election where a campaign could change the election process after they're watching absentee ballots come in. To know the votes coming in and then change it is to undermine the very process we have. There's no integrity in the process if we're doing that. And that's what's going on. To have a fair process, we cannot do that. Also, the call without rescinding provision.
Who would like to speak against the motion?
I would like to.
Jeff?
Noticing that the numbers of 1,700 delegates were actually submitted or actually applied to be delegates, yet less than 500 attended, at a venue that was advertised in 3 days prior to the convention, nobody knowing where the convention was gonna really be held. I don't see how we don't see that as a flaw. Because less than a third of the people showed up at the convention based on their own admission of how many people were elected, or signed up as delegates.
Who would like to speak for the motion? Adela?
All right, to me, I think that there is a difference between gathering and setting, and that is not my definition, it's the definition of conventions under the Robert's Rules of Order. It clearly states that voting membership at convention is established through different ways, including accredited delegates in the way that they did in the mass meeting, and at that point, it attached. And Robert's Rules clearly states on
Time. Yep. Who would like to speak against the motion? Who would like to speak against the motion? Anyone for? Mark?
Mr. Chairman, what's important, what's at risk here is people's perception of a fair process. They try to make it a struggle in the public arena. The 1,650 plus people participate in this event. We sought guidance from council and found no mention of how to stop a process after delegates had been seated in mass meetings verified. It's no longer a contest between individuals. It's a contest to decide if there is confidence to be had in our process, in our party, and the rule of law, and the tenets and fairness in our Republican creed in the United States of America.
Is there anyone that would like to speak either for or against? Russ?
Just like to say that if we fail to affirm this appeal, we will end up creating a situation where we essentially have something akin to a constitutional crisis. They've said that the convention was not ready, but it occurred, it was well run. They've said that the chairman vacated his duties. He gaveled open the convention, finished setting up the convention. That is not vacated. There were other things, I'll rest there, thank you.
Who else would like to speak either for or against the motion? Heather?
I have a real problem with the fact that a process was started, the horse is out of the barn, you can't get it back in, it doesn't show.
For or against? For or against?
For, I agree with Heather and a couple other people. I think my concern coming here is the integrity and the reliability of our processes, which I believe are critical for both candidates and voters to have confidence in the Republican Party of Virginia, of which we all are little bits and pieces. So I'm very concerned that if we did anything other than affirm this, we would destroy the processes.
Who else would like to speak? Anyone for or against?
I just like to say, most of the time, I've been running conventions and mass meetings and stuff for a long time, and most of us are C students trying to get an A. And honestly, I think everybody has to watch this through the prism, which is key to the path that this convention went on. And in my opinion, the preponderance of what has been brought forward through Robert's Rules, our party plan, and just simple fairness dictates that we support this appeal.
Here, here.
Who else would like to speak either for or against? Hearing none, are you ready for the question?
I think, point of order, you, without having exhausted speeches, you don't need to call the question. Second, I would like to move that this be a recorded vote.
Roll call?
Yes.
Reread the motion, please.
Yeah, the motion that Steve made was for a roll call vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Any debate on that? All those in favor of a roll call vote, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
vote.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, may we have a secretary reread the motions recorded in the minutes?
Yes, please.
Or you may have to reread what you said, I don't know if the secretary.
How you do that?
Your motion was to make this a roll call vote to.
No, the main motion.
The main motion. The main motion was to approve the appeal.
Or uphold the appeal.
Uphold the
You had some other language, though.
Yeah, the other language, it can back,
You may, present the motion and.
the way I recall presenting it, I didn't have it written down, was a motion to find that the bringing of a motion to change the method of nomination after the delegates had already all been elected was out of order, and therefore the appeal should be sustained.
At this time, we will move to a vote, and I'll ask the secretary to call the roll and record each vote.
So vote of aye is sustaining the appeal.
Yes, the vote of aye is upholding the appeal, the vote of no or nay, no, deny the appeal. Ready?
Okay.
Is there a second?
No, it was seconded earlier.
Willie had seconded.
So the motion is to vote for a finding that bringing the motion, that in the appeal, bringing a motion after the convention has been properly called was improper, and the appeal should be upheld.
That the motion at the 97th Legislative District Committee to change the method of nomination was out of order, and therefore the appeal should be sustained.
Okay.
Go ahead and call the roll for the vote.
Okay. Bob Watson, you'll start with Heather. Start with Heather? Okay. Heather?
Aye.
Willie?
Aye.
Mark Daniel?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye, by proxy.
Steve Albertson?
Yes. Aye.
Jennifer White?
No.
And Jeff Silly?
No.
And Dave Rector?
Yes.
And David Willis?
Aye.
And Pat Dunnington?
Aye.
And Dale Taylor?
No.
And Chris Henderson?
Aye.
And John Hubbard?
No.
And Mike Scholler?
Aye.
And Fulton Wood?
Aye.
And Trudy Fagum?
Aye.
And Jerry Benson?
Aye.
And John Huber?
Aye.
And Bill Card?
Aye.
And Scott Phelps?
Aye.
And Adela Bertolli?
Aye.
And Alan Ayler?
No.
Okay.
Were you missed?
I was missed.
Please call Russ.
Where are you? Good, Russ.
Aye.
Okay, I didn't have you down as on.
skipped or allegedly skipped. Thank you, William.
You sure we haven't missed somebody on the count?
No,
Yeah, you have,
23 present.
Counted 22, and Bob would have been 23.
Okay, I get 17 ayes and 5 nays.
Vote was 17 affirmative, 5 noes, the motion passes. At this time, we will move into the remedy. And I'll just remind everybody of the rules. We'll debate, there'll be a motion for a remedy here. And then we will debate this using the same rules we used for debate. It will be 20 minutes. Willie.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the First District declare, 1, that the convention held on May 4th, 2019 was valid. 2, the certification of the nominee elected at convention of the State Board of Elections was valid and proper. 3, the call by the 97th LDC for the party canvass scheduled for June 1, 2019 is null and void. And 4, the 97th LDC and the chairman are not responsible for any expenses incurred in any event other than the validly held convention on May 4th, 2019.
Hey, Willie, could you just,
And I have a copy of this, I'm going to give to the secretary.
Could you just-
I'll have to read it.
slower, Walt's
Sorry. I'm used to reading closed session motions and good quickly. I move that the First District declare, 1, the convention held on May 4, 2019 was valid. 2, certification of the nominee elected at the convention to the State Board of Elections was valid and proper. 3, the call by the 97th LDC for the party canvass scheduled for June 1, 2019 is null and void. And 4, that the 97th LDC and the chairman are not responsible for any expenses incurred at any event other than the validly held convention on May 4, 2019.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
Second.
Willie, since you made the motion, you wish to speak to it, about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think these remedies are appropriate and proper given the appeal that we have voted on.
Thank you. Who would like to speak against the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know what it means that the 97th isn't responsible for any other cost other than the convention.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, I'm not in a position to, answer that.
Well, it's a motion, and I think that could incur costs to the First District and every committee in it. And I don't know that that's proper, that all of us incur costs for something that we're hearing an appeal on, that I personally don't feel like we should be hearing at this point. So to incur costs, I don't think that's proper in the motion.
Could we amend it to state, I think the intent, or at least what I perceive the intent to be, that there are any party processes external to the convention and, associated, costs would have to be borne by somebody other than the 97th, that,
Boy,
so it's,
how is that inferred in that
Well, but
motion?
it's according to ordinance, if you want to make that an amendment, you want to amend the language?
if it would help with clarity, to state that, any process is not authorized, not connected to the approved convention, would not be borne by the committee.
I don't know what that means.
Mr. Chairman?
I think what it means to me is that if somebody holds a mass meeting,
We can't have cross-talking free to make an amendment, to, the previous motion if you want to.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a point? And maybe, Mr. Deutsch can very briefly confirm this. I think what Bill is trying to say, and that his intent here, is to, give a cautionary warning to anyone who may try and hold some other process that we are not going to foot the bill, so don't expect us to. Exactly.
So,
And going on record loud that that is the case may indeed be effective in saying, you knew going in, you knew before you spent the money, that we weren't gonna pick up the tab.
so Willie, I mean, was that your intent? I mean, is that?
Mr. Chairman, I think the chairman from Prince William accurately reflects the intent. And I think we're saying the same things with different words, but I think it's clear that I'll just read it one more time, that the 97th LDC and the chairman are not responsible for any expenses incurred at any event other than the validly held convention on May 4, 2019. So essentially, if another method of nomination other than the one that we've approved on this appeal were to be held.
So that is speaking for, who would like to speak against the motion?
I want to speak against that part of the motion. I'm okay with 1, 2, and 3. I'm not okay with 4. To me, the language sounds like they're trying to indemnify the chairman and 97th district, and I don't think that that's appropriate, because nowhere in that motion would say who is going to pay for that. And I think that that is improper. If they want to bring that up, maybe that's something separate, that's out of the scope of what we're deciding, and that was never brought up. So I actually have an issue with part 4. I get Mr. Albertson's concept of, trying to deter future, but I think that's out of the scope, and I totally oppose part 4. I'm okay with 1, 2, and 3.
Who would like to speak for? Steve?
Sort of point of order is, if that's gonna be acted upon, it needs to be established motion to amend.
Oh, amended, I mean.
I haven't done
you
an
want to
alternate
formally
motion, but I'm
remove it?
saying, if you were just asking for who was, opposed, I mean, if you want me to do, I will, move to amend the motion, for just parts 1, 2, and 3 of the prior, and not part 4.
So Adela has moved to drop the 4th point, from that motion, that said that the 97th and the chairman are not responsible for any expenses incurred at any other event other than the validly held convention on May 4th. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So it's been seconded, discussion. Willie?
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the motion, part 4 follows logically on part 3 in this motion proposed. If we were to agree that the party canvass call for June 19th is null and void, then to expect that the LDC committee is to pay for costs that would be associated with a null and void call doesn't follow. And so if we're nullifying the call issued for the June 1 party canvass, then we shouldn't be expecting the LDC to pay costs.
Time. Who would like to speak? Steve?
I'd like to speak in favor of the amendment. Didn't expect to be here, but because of what Mr. Deutsch said, it's unnecessary, because it's already been declared null and void, and the people who may incur these costs are on notice that it is our intention that no party organization.
Those who'd like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, is it even within our purview to tell the legislative district what it can't do in the future?
This is just a declaration.
A declaration.
This is a declaration. Would anyone else like to speak either for or against the amendment, which is to just drop point 4? Okay, at this time we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment to drop the 4th point, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
The chair can't tell.
Division?
So we're going to do a standing vote, please.
Sorry.
No, we voted and it was, the chair can determine which side had it. So at this point, again, all those in favor of dropping the 4th point, please signify by standing. get help. This is about dropping, this is for dropping the fourth point.
Okay.
You've got it. Okay, be seated. All those opposed, please stand.
You're welcome.
Okay, be seated. So the motion carries, and the fourth item will be struck. Any other discussion on the main motion for these declarations? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of adopting these remedies as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Any of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion passes. Before we entertain any other motions, I wanted to just thank our planner, Dave Willis. I wanted to thank our parliamentarian, Paul Prados, who fought some heavy traffic to get here. I want to thank a member of the Stafford Committee who's helping out Edgar tonight on
Morgan Birch.
Yep, Morgan. And, yeah, Morgan, I should remember that, Morgan, it was Morgan. So, but thank you for assisting tonight. At this time, I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Second? Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?